They do, but Christina Patterson and Brendan O'Neill are here with us to talk through the ones we've got and also reflect on Prince Harry's speech tonight, because a lot of the front pages are focusing once again on Harry and Meghan. You've picked out the Daily Telegraph first of all. Charles to fund the Sussexes for a year. And before we get into the meat of this, perhaps we should kind of reflect on how Prince Harry has been describing it tonight. What did you make of that little clip you just saw there?
Well, I felt very sad, actually, because I have a huge amount of sympathy for Harry. He did lose his mother when he was a child. He's had to grow up in the glare of the media. He feels that the media basically killed his mother, and he clearly wants to protect his wife and son from what he sees as a similar fate. However, having said that, I think he has handled this whole thing rather badly and continues to. I think that the speech he gave this evening was undignified. I think clearly, the whole thing now is to go straight to social media, go to Instagram, build a brand, make it clear what you feel about everything all the time. I don't think it's appropriate. I think the Queen has been very generous in expressing her support and sympathy for, and particularly in singling out Meghan's ability to adapt to the family, which sadly she hasn't done, actually, but she went out of her way in the statement she gave yesterday to say, I'm particularly proud of how Meghan has adapted to royal life. And I think Harry has made it very clear in the speech that he said, I didn't get what I wanted. And one thing you shouldn't do when you've just made an agreement and it's been thrashed out over weeks and in the last instance, days, is to say, oh, this isn't what I wanted. I think it's graceless, actually.
Although the way he expresses it was, our hope was to continue serving the Queen, the Commonwealth, and my military associations, but without public funding. Unfortunately, that wasn't possible. I mean, in a sense, is he saying I didn't get what I wanted, or is he trying to say to everyone, I really did want to carry on, I love the Queen, I wanted to carry on doing her work, but because, of course, we're not going to take public funding, I couldn't do that.
Yeah, I think
explaining it rather than feeling cross about it. I don't know what you think.
I think it's very rare for the royal family to air their dirty laundry in public in the way that they have been over the past week or so. I mean, it's very subtle, but the Queen has indicated that she's not happy about them going. Harry has now indicated this evening in this speech that he didn't get what he wanted, and he's upset about that. So there are hostilities, and if that's what is being said in public, then we can only imagine that there are tensions behind the scenes. So I think this is probably a bigger...
Accepted me for...
Queen has indicated that she's not happy about them going. Harry has now indicated this evening in this speech that he didn't get what he wanted, and he's upset about that. So there are hostilities, and if that's what is being said in public, then we can only imagine that there are tensions behind the scenes. So I think this is probably a bigger deal than the kind of politer side of the royal family is letting on. It is like an abdication. The thing that irritated me about his speech, it has more media bashing in it. He says the media is a powerful force and the media made his life a misery and so on. I just wish he would change the record on that, to be honest, because I think what we've had in the Harry and Meghan soap opera is a lot of media bashing, blaming the media for everything, a lot of Britain bashing, this idea that the country is racist, and we've seen a lot of that in the commentary over the past week or so, where people, not necessarily these individuals, although Harry and Meghan have hinted at this, but observers are constantly telling us that the country is racist, that's why we couldn't take to Meghan. I think that's a defamation against the country. This is not a racist country, this is an open, tolerant country, and I think that the way in which Harry and Meghan and their supporters have dropped these hints that the country is racist and the media is racist, I think that will have turned off a lot of people because it just feels untrue to so many people.
Okay, quick word on that, and we should get to today's papers.
I agree. I do.
Some of the criticism that's been levelled at her has come from...
I do largely agree with that, actually. I'm sure some of the criticism that's been levelled at her has been racist. I think that, of course, there is racism in this country. There's racism in every country. But I think it's unfair to assume that all criticism to her comes from racism. I don't think it does.
Okay, let's move to today's paper, shall we? Daily Telegraph, Charles to fund the Sussexes for a year. And so the big question now that they are... really taking a step back, they're taking a step completely away from the royal family, so they will be financially independent, and this goes into some of the details of where some of their money might come from.
Yes, there are still lots of things to iron out. That's what becomes very clear, and I think a lot of this will really irritate Harry and Meghan's camp. I mean, one of the sticking point, I mean, there is security, there's funding, who will look after them, who will protect them, but then there's this sticking point over Sussex Royal and whether they can use that brand, and apparently it's in the gift of the royal family to decide if they will be allowed to call themselves Sussex Royal, which is obviously the kind of corporate global brand that they were angling for, and it's not clear that they will be able to do that.
So they need to be able to use that. People know who they are.
No, I don't think they need to be able to use that. But I think it's about control, and I think that they have been plotting this thing for months. They've got web designers, they've got copywriters, they've got all these brand managers lined up. And if the Queen or Prince Charles or whoever kiboshes this, then obviously they'll be very cross. I think. Clearly, the area they're hoping to move into is the kind of super rich league. They want to be, a la Clooney's, a la Obama's, a la Clinton's, etc. But to be honest, they haven't achieved what those people have achieved in order to have the celebrity status they have.
Well, and they're in the Mirror. Sorry, Brendan, I don't mean to cut you off, but let's bring in the Daily Mirror because they're implying what you're saying.
Yeah.
Harry, billion-dollar battle. I mean, isn't the truth we don't really know how they do intend to make their money or live their life?
We don't know, but we can guess. I mean, they mix with the Obamas, they mix with the Clintons, they mix with incredibly wealthy, influential people. Christina's right. The difference is that those people have made a huge impact politically and in public life, and Meghan hasn't particularly done that. Harry, of course, was born into public life. But the thing is, I think one of the key things is that I think one of the things that irritated people about Meghan, I don't think it had anything to do with her race or her background or where she comes from. It was when she indicated quite clearly that she wanted to become this very woke, I hate to use the word woke, but this very woke spokesperson, this woke global globetrotter who would go around the world fixing all the problems with rubbing shoulders with other incredibly rich woke people.
Yeah.
And there was an element of hypocrisy too. They were flying to the south of France to stay in Elton John's house in a private jet while lecturing the rest of us about our carbon footprints. That's because if you think back to the wedding, people were incredibly supportive. Millions watched it, millions cheered it. It's only when they indicated that they wanted to become these slightly grating global lecturers that people said, that's not what royals are meant to do.
That's how you see them. There's also a lot of the public, it seems like younger people in particular. I'm not saying that you're not young. I don't know which camp you fall into.
I'm incredibly young, but I'm irritated.
I'm definitely not young. I'll make that clear, if it wasn't obvious. But have a lot of sympathy with them, saying why should we have to work in a job that we were born into?
Look, I have a lot of sympathy for them. I think to lose your mother is a terrible thing. To have to live in the public eye is a terrible thing, actually. I mean, I think nobody chooses to be born into the royal family, and it's a ghastly life for the most part. I have huge amounts of sympathy for Harry, and I've always liked him. I thought he was the most likeable member of the royal family, but I'm afraid, and I'm not going to blame Meghan for this because I have no idea what has motivated his behaviour or comments in the last 2 years, but all I can say is he seems to become a fair bit less likeable, and there is a slightly whinging tone. And I think one of the features of the Queen's behaviour that has always been very admirable is she's always been very dignified, and she doesn't whinge. And I think you can't have it both ways. If you want private life, fine. Be Mr. and Mrs. Windsor, but then don't expect to get the Netflix deals and the Disney deals. I'm afraid one of the things that emerged in the last week or so was the footage of Harry basically asking some Disney executive for Meghan to do a voiceover.
Well, he said she does voiceovers.
Yes, I know. And then Meghan made a joke about, that's the real reason we're here, which may or may not have been an entire joke. I just think we'll see how long. Look, I personally have warmed to them. I sat and watched the wedding. I loved it. I absolutely wanted them to be happy. I still want them to be happy. I think he deserves any happiness he can get. But I agree with Brendan that if their only route to happiness is to go around lecturing people about their carbon footprint, their mental health, and their eco credentials, and whether or not they're going to be vegan or racism or women's domestic, abuse shelters, then I think they're going to find A, their repertoire gets exhausted quite quickly, and B, people are going to get a bit bored with it.
Yeah, and obviously they would argue that they're trying to make the world a better place. But let's move on to the front page of the Metro because they have a picture there of Harry and Meghan. They're out, and then they have a picture of the Queen today going to church and seen with Prince Andrew for the first time in public together seen since he stepped back from royal duties?
Yeah, you know, I'm a real hardcore Republican, but even I find myself feeling quite sorry for the Queen over the past few weeks because she's been putting up with a lot. There's the whole Andrew crisis. He has behaved repugnantly, in my view, and if these allegations are true, then that's even a million times worse.
And of course, he
denies that, yeah. And then there's the whole Harry and Meghan thing, and basically a modern-day application. So she's put up with a lot, and of course, Prince Philip is not very well at the moment. So I found myself feeling sorry for the Queen. But I think one of the great myths of the Harry and Meghan discussion is that Prince Andrew is being treated gently and they're being criticised all the time. That's not actually true. He did retire from public life. He got a lot of flack in the media and he deserved it. But I think the royal family is under a lot of pressure at the moment.
Okay, we are going to have to leave it there. I'm sure we'll discuss this again when you come back at 11:30. But for now, we're going to take a break and look at some other stories after the break, including the UK's divergence from the EU in post-Brexit is provoking economic alarm bells in Brussels, apparently. We're going to find out about that after the break.